I'm so pleased to have with me today Kirk Laughlin, who's not only the founder, but also the editorial director for Nearshore Americas. Kurt, thank you for joining me today.
Great to see you, Dawn.
So tell us, Nearshore Americas, how long have you been around?
We've been around about a year and a half.
Okay, so I must have met you right around the beginning of this, right?
We did. We contacted Sourcing Interest Group very early on in our evolution. Identified Sourcing Interest Group is one of the leading kind of groups, associations representing the international outsourcing, buyer and seller and influencer groups. So we started coming to your conferences early on.
Yeah, so now tell me about Nearshore Americas. What are you as a company? What are you trying to do? What's your vision?
Our vision is pretty simple. We found that there's a real gap in knowledge around nearshore outsourcing, this entire Latin American outsourcing industry, about $15 to $20 billion market, and there really wasn't a dedicated media brand like a Business Week for nearshore outsourcing out there. Mm-hmm. I come from a background working as an IT and tech journalist for about 20 years with companies like Ziff Davis and Information Week. And we, with several other partners and colleagues, we decided to launch a brand that would provide really good information, analysis, deep research from the perspective of providing it for free in order to generate value for the buy side, primarily people who are trying to understand what's going on in Colombia, what advantages could I have around nearshore outsourcing, what's going on with labor, total cost of outsourcing, lots of issues. We've got something like 900 articles now at our website.
Wow, okay. So HFS just released their new report. Have you had a chance to read it?
I have. I've read half of it.
Good, isn't it?
It's very well done.
Yeah, I was pleased that they unveiled it at our event here today.
Yeah, very well done.
Yeah.
Very well done.
So tell me, Nearshore, do you also consider Canada?
Yes. Our definition of nearshore is basically the entire Western Hemisphere, so all the way down to the tip of Chile, all the way up to Canada, the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. Because of the time zone advantages, we feel like that mitigates any question about the distance. You know, the fact is that getting to Argentina or Brazil can be fairly long. Mm-hmm. It's not the same as going to Honduras or Mexico or Colombia. But because of the cultural advantages and because of the time zone, that still kind of, in our view, qualifies as nearshore.
So it's very comfortable for anyone in North America to travel to South America. For some reason, the cultures seem to adapt quite quickly to one another. Do you find that that's an advantage in the outsourcing space?
No question. No question. There are countless examples that I'm hearing where when the client is requiring a certain user interface, a certain end product, if it's maybe even a social media application, there seems to be this intuitive understanding in the Latin American workforce among these IT professionals and outsourcing professionals as to what the client is looking for. A great example is Google is outsourcing a lot of their work for a project called Open Social, which is a open source solution, and they're using a delivery center organization called Globant in Argentina. And they're thrilled by what they see out of the creativity of that staff. And I think a lot of it relates to this culture thing we talk about.
Well, that's great. So there's a lot of talk about trying to keep jobs onshore in the United States especially. Do you think nearshore is better received than offshore, to India or China or something like that? Is there a better reception to at least keep it in the Americas?
Well, that's a really good question. I personally, I seem to think that we, being in North America, we know, or at least a lot of us have met folks from Mexico. We know, maybe we've gone to college with folks who've been coming up from Peru, Argentina. So from that perspective, I think, and also being aware that there's been some challenges in those locations. Don't get me wrong, let's acknowledge the fact that there's been political challenges, there's been instability, and I think from my worldview, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to help our neighbors improve their societies, improve the middle class, make those societies more stable, create middle class jobs, which enables those societies to emerge.
Well, and let's clarify, middle class there does not mean we're taking away middle class jobs here.
No, and there's lots of research about the fact that these practices can enable a U.S. company to get stronger. I look at my own business. I started this business a year and a half ago. I have onshore staff. I'm creating jobs, creating opportunity for U.S. people who are making an income. And I also have now a web team in Costa Rica, and I sort of get to drink my own Kool-Aid and see what it's like. And it's been fabulous. It's tremendous. And the folks that I have onshore are excited about working with the Nearshore folks. And the Nearshore folks are excited to be part of a growing brand.
And boy, it really is horrible to have to travel to Costa Rica once in a while.
Yeah, my just hate it.
I bet you do.
It's really tough. Yeah.
So let's talk about risk, and I wonder who it is that keeps stirring up all the media hype. How much is media hype? How much is real? Are there personal safety issues? How do you
Sure.
really feel about that?
Well, we have thought hard and long about this topic of personal safety. It's certainly an issue that comes up a lot. What we've chosen to do is speak to the decision makers and folks who go to these markets all the time. We feel like there's no replacement for those people who have gone there firsthand. So for myself, I've been to Latin America now probably 12 or 14 times in the last year and a half. And I find time and time again that I don't have any issue with personal safety. So again, I'm going to certain parts of town that are business districts where there's usually a nice hotel in a certain area that usually there's no problems at all. But anyway, what we're doing is we're doing a survey of folks who do outsourcing in Latin America to find out what their experiences have been. And our survey is coming out in the next week or two. And the preliminary look at the research shows that a lot of the hype is overblown. They're not to ignore the fact that there's certain areas of towns that you go to, certain areas of Mexico, in fact, are not terribly safe. However, it all has to be taken in context.
There's parts of the U.S. that aren't safe.
Exactly.
So you just have to be aware of where you're going. So where do you see the evolution of offshoring to nearshoring? Do you think we're going to be taking jobs or outsourcing agreements that are currently offshore? Do you see some of those shifting to nearshore?
I don't think it's necessarily a replacement or immediate substitute for what's going on offshore. I think more and more we're seeing it as a complement, part of this global delivery model where people are recognizing that there's certain strengths that you can have nearshore. Frankly, there is, and I hear this from the Tier 1 Indian vendors, that there's concerns about attrition in India and competition for talent. And depending on the kind of outsourcing functions you're looking for, nearshore fits really well. So I'm getting the sense that we're really evolving into a new era where the nearshore is looked at with, it's perceived to have more maturity than it's ever had before. And I just spoke to one of the Indian outsourcers here at SIG, and he says that he's getting swamped with RFPs and RFIs from U.S. companies looking specifically for nearshore.
Ah.
So that says a lot.
That's a big trend. I like that. Tell me, infrastructure-wise, government support, trade agreements, do you see the South American companies focusing on education of the workforce to the level that we want? Do you see them building the infrastructures, the laws that would actually help protect companies that go to South America? We see China, huge investment. Mm-hmm. They build the infrastructure before they ever outsource. India didn't. They brought the outsourcing over, and you still know how long it takes to drive on a road in India. Mm-hmm. South America, where do you see them? Do you think they're going to be doing a logical rollout? Are they putting a lot of money into education?
Right, great question. It's a mixed bag, to be honest with you. The infrastructure piece, the telecom infrastructure, by and large, is really strong. Places like Chile have one of the most competitive telecom markets in the world. So I think, and then the issue of real estate and addressable real estate, usable site space continues to evolve. I do think, though, you see some great examples of private-public partnerships and driving better education levels, for example, IT talent. Mm-hmm. And in other instances where markets just are still have the mindset that let's try to bring in some manufacturing. They're not completely grasping the opportunity around the knowledge worker and attracting companies like HP or captives from major U.S. firms.
So a nearshore track at SIG, I'd love to have one. what would you say, give me a couple topics that you would want to make sure we're in that track. What do
Yeah.
people need to be educated on?
Well, number one, knowing what SIG is so good at, I think a very interesting topic and sort of speaking to the core group we're trying to speak to, and also the group you consider very core to your group, is the issue of let's really get down to brass tacks on cost. Not just FTE versus FTE offshore to nearshore, but let's get some more hard science behind the issue of the issue of if you're going to send your CIO to India for a week and you've only had to send them for 2 days down to Guadalajara, for example, how do you quantify that in a total cost of outsourcing model? How do you quantify this issue of communication cultural advantage? I think there is a growing sense that there's a hard value behind that. But I think that would be very appealing to the buy side because they need to be armed with that kind of value,
Right.
with that kind of argument to be able to prove it out. And I think also is very valuable, as you can imagine, is hearing from people who are doing it now. What's gone well? What hasn't gone well?
What do you think, how the chances of us getting some trade ambassadors or country representatives? I mean, I'd love for them to come and sell us on their country and say, this is what we're doing, this is how we can welcome business, this is how we can make it safe, this is how we're building up an infrastructure. I would love for people to be able to come and hear from these folks.
Well, I'm in touch with all those folks. I can tell you that some markets are really, really polished at presenting the value proposition. Costa Rica stands out. Colombia has done a tremendous job working together in making their locations attractive. Chile's always been strong. Brazil's got a number of really great agencies to help explain the value. Some of those trade representatives are people we interview all the time at Nearshore America, so we'd love to help if you need some help.
Yeah, and people keep asking, I want to hear from the governments, I want to hear from the agencies, I want to hear from the people that I need to be able to depend on. So we'd love to bring that to our next summit.
Well, it's a great point. You want to trust the governments where you're going to be doing business. You want to have a real sense that there's a rule of law, that the judicial system will back what you're doing, that there's data privacy protections. Those are all very valid concerns.
Good. So you can help me do that.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, I know we're out of time, and Kirk, I know you've got a jam-packed schedule, so thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have Nearshore America sitting here with me today.
Well, thank you so much, Dawn. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Dawn Evans, and we'll see you next time.